Welcome to the Sales Buzz. I'm Rick Ammey, your host for this exciting Brooks Group webinar. Thanks for tuning in. Today's topic, how to determine how good your sales team really is. And I'm here with Bill Brooks, CEO of the Brooks Group. Bill has been a sales consultant for 28 years. He heads the Brooks Group, an international sales and sales management consulting firm based in Greensboro, North Carolina. He has authored, count them, 18 books, including 3 national bestsellers. Let's get started. I'm sure everybody wants to know how really good their sales team is. And let me begin by asking this. Could a sales manager fool his or herself in assuming that they have a great sales team and they really don't?
What do you think?
Oh, of course.
So the question is, in comparison to what? Maybe you say, well, in comparison to everybody else in our industry, we're pretty good. Well, by the same token, how much better do you have to be to dominate in your industry? See, we talked before in one of our webinars about strong branding. Strong branding can conceal a weak sales force. If somebody comes out of the blue someplace, if you look at enough really good brands, they don't even have a sales force. People, they go to the destination website or they go to an 800 phone line. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is the sales force may be out there pushing the envelope a little bit or raising the bar a little bit. The truth of the matter is, what defines a good sales team? And I'm going to suggest to you that the sales manager or sales executive has to determine that in some degree of objective manner. Is it the number of leads generated? Is it conversion rates? Is it margins held? Is it number of new business accounts opened? Is it the number of businesses that they are doing business with over the long haul? Is it accurate paperwork? I mean, the bottom line to it is, if you're operating in a void, you really don't know what the competition's doing. Not that you want to copy the competition, but you can really believe you're pretty good, but you're not that good. Let me give you an example. The NCAA is broken down to Division I, II, and III. Mount Union is a great Division III school and has been for years. But if Mount Union, who wins the National Division III championship, went and played against Notre Dame, they probably wouldn't have a lot of success. In fact, the NCAA even has 1A, 1AA, 2, and 3. And so what you've got is you got 4 different levels. So the question is, where do you have to be? But then the other question is, how good do you have to be? I'm going to suggest to you that if you worry a whole lot less about the competition and a whole lot more about what you demand from your sales team for them to be considered good, you're going to be a whole lot better off.
And that gets to the question that was going through my mind. Do you measure how good your team is by measuring the team against the competition, or do you measure the team against itself?
That's the dilemma, because you have to sell against the competition. You don't have to sell against the other salespeople. So what happens is, unless you really do both, you're in trouble. I'll give you an example. When we benchmark a job, people always say to us, why don't we benchmark our top people? No. What if your top people inside of your company are A's, but in your marketplace or segment, they're C's?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
You're always going to lose against them because your A is really a D. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so what happens is, you do have to compare them to a certain extent, because when you're out there, in most cases, you're not the only game in town. So you've got a sell against scenario. The question then is, how much market do you want? How much share do you want? What do you want to do with your business? But I want to tell you something. I really believe that if you do ongoing training, coaching, curbside coaching, joint call audits, hold them accountable, keep track of the numbers, and hire the right people, you're going to have a good sales team. Now, what happens with some people, and this is an interesting situation, we've had clients over the years that thought they were great, and then a couple of years ago, when the economy tanked, mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many calls we got from people saying, we really found out how ineffective our sales force was when things went south. But it was too little, too late.
And what you're saying is that if you compare the sales team against itself, you're really kind of operating in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're not in the real world, and the real world is where you really need to be to find out how good you are.
I mean, here, for example, there are two types of cultures that you can create inside of your sales team. One is a competitive culture, one's an achievement culture. You need a balance of the two. A competitive culture is when I compete against other members of the team. An achievement culture is when I compete against my own previous best. Mm-hmm. And you need to have a balance of the two, but then you have to really say, given our market position and where we are, how effective is our sales force in comparison to someone else's? But you don't worry about the someone else, because what that means is if they're superior, you're going to get more business, you're going to make more sales, you're going to get more margin. It will show in this process. Now, if you use what we call end process evaluation to determine how good they are, you're in trouble. What you want to use is in process evaluation.
Okay, explain that.
Okay, let me give you an example. Rick, let's say, for example, that you judge your sales force by how many widgets they sell. You're looking at what? End results. I judge my sales force by how many prospects they generate, how many contacts they make, what kind of conversion ratio they have, how many sales calls they go on, etc., etc., etc. In the long run, who do you think will probably have more success?
Yeah.
Now, I know what someone is doing. They're sitting out there and saying that's micromanagement. It's how you establish the culture of accountability inside of your sales team. Strong organizations have a very, very effective culture of accountability, holding people answerable for their own actions and their own results. Long-term, success is driven by in-process evaluation rather than purely by end-process measurement.
You know, in a sense, you're like describing the building of a pyramid. You have to lay this foundation of doing all these things right. And if you build the foundation piece by piece and all those things together, then eventually it reaches to the peak, which is where the great sales are. You don't want to be just leaping to the top without having that foundation underneath.
Because even if you get there, it's going to fall down.
Right.
So let me give you another thought here, Rick, as it relates to this. What happens with people is I really am intrigued with sales management and do a lot of the training. And I'm telling you, one of the strengths, which we measure, by the way, is what's called external systems judgment. External systems judgment means this. How good is someone and how important is it to them to develop systems and order in an organization? If someone's got a very low systems judgment, they say stupid things like, I let people manage themselves, I don't want to micromanage, I hire professional people and I get out of their way. What they're really doing is they're overcoming for their own lack of systems judgment. Mm-hmm. The most effective sales managers operate by systems and principles. The ones who are really lousy, like my first sales manager, manage me by telling me the specific words to say, no structure, just memorization and tricks and chicanery and all that kind of stuff. And frankly, he was terrible.
Can I tell you a story about one time when I first started my business and I was just learning how to sell? I was trying to convince this company that will go unnamed, a very fine company, to do business with me, and I was trying to follow a memorized process of sales, right? And I got to about 2/3 of the way to selling these people, and the person I was selling turned to me and said, "Wait a minute, you got your steps out of order." They said, "You can't ask for the sale until you do this first and you do that first." And my face turned beet red, and I realized that I was also trying to mechanically sell rather than really
emotionally connect.
Yes.
Yeah, see,
you know what happened when at that point, I just put the darn thing aside and I just started paying attention to them, stopped paying attention to my process, just to do the process. Ask them questions, talk to them, and I got the sale at the end.
See, here's the problem. You have to have a methodology and a process. But what it has to do, it's got to be drilled, trained, and internalized in such a way that it's automatic.
Well, it didn't look too automatic.
Yeah, well, it was. Well, but remember, you wrote it down and did it. Was kind of you winged it. So unless you reinforce,
no, I didn't wing it. I
manage. What am I saying?
I just wasn't very good at it.
You weren't very good at it. You've gotten better at it.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what we're giving ideas for how to make sure that your sales team really is good, and how not to be fooled into thinking that they're better than they really are. So, item number 1 on our list of tips for everybody who is watching the webinars: strong brands can create a weak sales force.
Yes.
This has come up before. Elaborate on that if you want, please.
What happens is the brand carries it. Look at websites. You've got some destination websites. They don't have to worry about getting high on search engines because somebody's going to type their name in there anyway. You know, they're going to type in Dell Computers. They're going to type in Hewlett Packard. They're going to type in Ford or Chevrolet, or in every industry so what happens then is you generate a lead and they go and get you. Somebody's got to scrap to get up on the search engines and scrap to get a prospect. Just by pure osmosis, they're going to learn how to do it better because they're having to struggle with it every day. I can't tell you. We had a young fellow one time that worked for us. He was the number 2 salesperson out of 700 people in the country for a very well-known manufacturer. He floundered and foundered here for about 8 months, and finally he didn't sell anything.
Really?
Didn't sell anything.
And that's because basically the brand had been carrying him.
The brand had been carrying him for about 15 years. His assessment was strong, everything. But what happened was it was hard to break out of that because when he showed up with their basic strategy was, this is how much of this product we'll let you have.
Jeez.
And he was making a lot of money. He was highly successful, but he wasn't selling anything.
Number 2, low pricing, small margins can create the illusion of a good sales force.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of this. For many years, when I was out doing a lot of speaking, I thought that I was a pretty hotshot salesperson selling my speaking engagements until I came to the conclusion that the reason why they did it is because I was low on my fee and I would cave in lower. It had nothing to you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
what I'm going to tell you is it's not volume, it's margin. Sales is always a margin game. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that the really good salespeople do 2 things. They sell high volume in high quantity. Oh, what am I saying? High volume. They sell high volume at high margin.
High margin, okay.
I thought it was kind of goofy.
Yeah.
They sell high volume at high margin. They don't tuck and run. They don't cut and run. They don't wow. They don't crack. They know how to substantiate the pricing. And the really good ones are the ones that consistently sell a lot of it at full margin.
Number 3, lack of a strong competition can fool you.
Yeah. What happens is you think that you're highly successful because you have a great sales team. Well, there's not much competition out there. Maybe they're not very good. Maybe you have a competitive product. Maybe you have one that's the first, that's the most innovative, that's the most unique. But here's the real problem. Never again will anyone have a long-term advantage in terms of any product that they offer. Because what happens is somebody's going to go over there in their plant someplace, they're knocking it off right now. And so consequently, you say, man, we've got a great sale. No, you had the right product at the right time, at the right market, and somebody is going to catch you. It's not because your salespeople are any good. Now, they may be very good. I'm not presuming that they're all bad. What I'm saying are these are things that can fool you into believing that maybe they're stronger than they are.
Well, and it happened to me. When I started doing what I've been doing for 12 years, there were very few people around the country who did it. And now there's so many people doing it, it's nearly a commodity.
And Rick, why don't you share with the people watching, because we've talked about it in other webinars. Rick, you do seminars, consulting on crisis communication?
What I do is crisis management. I help companies that are in trouble get out of trouble, prepare for trouble, coach their executives on what to do when they're in those situations, and then I speak on this, and I teach you teach sales principles. I teach crisis management, crisis leadership principles. And when I started doing this 12 years ago, I came from a journalism background, and I started, at that time, there were just a handful of people who were doing this. And then somebody broke the code in the world of journalism. They thought, hey, let's all get out of the journalism business and go out and teach companies how to do this. The thing that saved me was I was fortunate enough to realize that what happened is that most of the people were getting out of journalism and going out to teach people how to either give speeches or how to talk to the press. What I did to differentiate myself and keep my market was to talk about crisis management, which is something that's slow to learn, hard to learn, requires a whole lot of experience, and I had 20 years to build on. So I have a lot of competition in areas where I used to not have competition at all, but what I did is I morphed a lot of my business into the crisis area, and that's enabled me in order to stay in a strong position within my market.
And at the same time, because you and I have talked about it,
Got to be a better salesperson.
got to be a better salesperson.
I had to be.
Because you had to be.
Well,
see, the point is, when the competition comes in, you're going to have to be, and these, what I'm saying here is you might think it's great, but guess what? The competition is either non-existent or so weak that your sales force is not better.
That's right.
They just are selling a better product.
But I'll tell you something. We've talked in these webinars about you've got to be tough. You've got to when you get knocked down, you got to get back up and do what you've got to do. And many people out there watching us know this. When you start a business and you're living on fumes, and you blow a sales call, and you get off that phone, and you know why
you learn real fast.
You learn real fast.
In fact, real quickly, then we'll move back into this. You
Yeah.
remember when you first came into the business, one of the first things I suggested, I said, Rick, the first thing you need to do is to come to one of our sales training
Yeah,
programs.
exactly.
And it helped you, I believe.
Well, it did, and I'll tell those who are watching us what I found out is it's one thing to get on the telephone and talk to people and be mighty persuasive and friendly and gregarious and all that, but it can be a huge waste of time if you don't know what you're selling and how to sell it, which is what sales training is all
Which
about.
was all the difference.
Which is what we're talking about here.
Okay, what's the next one, Rick?
Okay, the next one is a poorly designed pay plan can lead to lethargy.
Yeah. I've said it before on many webinars, audio programs people listen to. You pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So what happens is if you don't have a good solid pay plan, if people can't make money, and the strongest salespeople want to make some money, what's going to happen is you're not going to ever build a real strong, sustained sales effort. By the same token, if you have such a strong base that they don't have to do much heavy lifting, and they get a car and they get expenses and a decent base, more than they ever thought they'd make in their lives, now what happens is you also then get lethargy, and in either case you're not constantly evolving the sales force. So what happens is it looks like you're doing okay, but you're not doing really great.
So you got to find a way to where the happy medium is.
Yes.
Okay. Are you in a sales or maintenance mode? You need to know where you are.
The truth is, are you opening up new accounts or are you sustaining old ones? And what's keeping the numbers going? Listen to this. I don't care who you sell for, who you work for, what you do. Sooner or later, you run the great risk of losing your customer. Your number one customer is somebody else's number one prospect. So if you're just in a maintenance mode and not opening up new accounts, you've got a lot of revenue coming in, but who's it coming in from? By the same token, if you're having to sell a lot of new stuff but not sustaining anything, that's just as big a problem, because now you've got to go out and find another one all the time, which says to me maybe your salespeople are not servicing the accounts well enough. So what happens is they just kind of, wean off of you. Here's the other thing. Do you have a pay plan, to go back to the previous point, that rewards salespeople for service? Does it reward them so much for service that they don't open up new accounts? Or do you reward them so much for opening new accounts that they don't do the service? Mm-hmm. So everything in life, it's like karma. Karma is the concept. It's like a butterfly. It has to be two wings. One wing and it does this. It has to go both ways.
Number 6, and what we're doing is talking about things to know to make sure that you're not being fooled, that your sales team is better than it really is. How to determine how good your sales team really is. One thing you can do is constantly raise the bar, which is something you mention all the time.
Here's what it is. The 6th point is this one. You have to know how to determine how good your sales team is. We've talked about ways to get fooled. Now let's talk about objective ways to determine. Number 1 is to constantly raise the bar. And the way to constantly raise the bar is to have them involved in goal setting, have them involved in sales targets. If you do it the correct way, they will come out with numbers, and then what you want to do is you want to constantly raise the bar on them in terms of sales, retention, margins, etc. And do this in an environment where everybody buys in and there's a total group commitment to raising the bar. I had a meeting with our folks the other day. I said, you have to understand something about the Brooks Group. Years ago, the bar was here, and if you were here, you were fine. The bar now is here. And if you're still here, you're going to have a problem, because we're only going to have room around here for the people who step up to it. So you say, well, are you that straightforward with an entire company? Yes, I am. Absolutely. Because I'm going to tell you, there's nothing worse than illusions. People need to know where they stand and what they have to do. And if they're tough-minded, tough people, they'll step up and they'll be held accountable.
Stressful margin selling.
My favorite subject. The name of the game, Rick, is selling at as large a margin as you possibly can. In fact, if you, say, have a 25% gross margin, and you reduce your sale price by 10%, you have to sell 3 times more product to have the same net that if you didn't knock off that. See, so what happens is that salesperson or salespeople, they say, okay, well, I can do better than that. Here's our regular price. Are you sitting down for this? Are you ready for this? And we've done webinars on this topic. But I'm going to tell you, the really good salespeople, how many times have you heard me say it over our webinar series? They sell high quantity at high margin. Sales has always been, will always be, all about margin, not about volume. Salespeople think it's about volume. And there's an old story about these two fellas that went to Mexico with a truck, and they bought some watermelons, and they bought them for $12 a dozen. And on the way back, they had a whole truck full of them. They got halfway back from Mexico to Dallas, and they had been selling the watermelons off the back of the truck for 75 cents a piece. And the guy said, I figured out what our problem is. He said, what's that? He said, we need a bigger truck. I mean, the name of the game is they're making it up in volume by losing on every deal.
Right.
So the truth is, just because they're selling a lot of volume doesn't mean your sales force is profitable.
And to drive toward the margin and ensuring the margin, you have got to keep reestablishing the value of the product.
Yes, and there's even something deeper than that, Rick. They've got to know what margin is. I've asked hundreds of salespeople, they don't know. Here's what it is. There's gross margin, and here's what it is. Selling price less cost of goods is gross margin. Now, below that, you have fixed and variable costs, right? As a sales manager, as a salesperson, I can't control the fixed and I can't control the variable. Now, what I can control? That gross margin. And the higher the gross margin is, the more we have to play with here. What you don't want to do is you don't want to be paying salespeople on profitability of the company, for example. Because here's what they say. How can I control how many pencils AMI buys? Well, you can control gross margin. And now what you do is smart companies actually pay a commission or a bonus based on gross margin.
Makes sense.
But see, now, you get what you reward.
Because if you're not targeting gross margin, then once again you're into the business of distractions, which we've talked about. You're worrying about other things that are not part of the sales process, not part of the sales management process. You're not minding the store.
Here's one I'd like to share with you, because I know what somebody's thinking out there. They're saying, well, my salespeople don't control the pricing. They control the offer made to your pricing by what they say, which means they do control pricing. They put a modifier on the price, like our regular price, our standard price, our catalog price, our price, which automatically says to the prospect what? There's a different price. Then they use what are called setup statements. They say, are you sitting down? Are you ready for this? Do you have your seatbelt on? Okay? And so what happens is they do control the pricing, because they plant in the mind of the buyer the way they say it that the price is too high. And so consequently, they establish themselves as the one who sets it by allowing the prospect to lower it. Subtle, but powerful.
Monitor competition.
Yeah. What you want to do is you want to find out what's going on, because here's what happens. And if you do it in a hearsay kind of a way and it travels over the grapevine, it's usually sour grapes. You need to find out for real what kind of pricing structure they have, what their marketing strategy is. You can find this out from people who sell against them with non-competitive products to yours. You can do their website. You can do this kind of stuff. Don't believe the customer, because the customer is always going to tell you, oh, they have this great price. Well, no, the customer is not the best source, but you need to monitor the competition.
Observe salespeople in the field.
How many times do we say that in our webinars?
A bunch.
The reason for it is that it would be like me, as I said one time, when I was a college football coach, not going out to practice and coaching the team and watching the team in as much of a simulation. The nice part about this is it's not simulation. They're out in front of a real live prospect. Watch what they do. If you have a sales methodology, do they follow it? Do they ask the right questions? Do they sell value? Do they not place a modifier on their price? Right? Do they overcome objections? Do they ask people to buy? The list goes on and on and on and on. And I'm going to submit to you that a lot of people manage their sales force with a computer sheet. Well, their goal was this. They sold this. It end process measurement. And it's too late.
Look for year-over-year improvement.
Yeah.
Now that does seem to be comparing yourself against yourself.
Yeah. That's how is your sales team doing against last year? And then you need to keep abreast of industry trends, association trends, Wall Street Journal information, what's going on in your segment, what's going on. The fact that you have 20% less sales might be very good, because let's say in your industry, your segment, your market, the average organization is down by 30. We had a client several years ago. He called me kiddingly. He said, I'm really upset with you guys. I said, why is that? Why are you upset with me? He said, sales are down 20% after we've worked with you. I thought, oh man. And he said, I'm only kidding. He said the average organization in our industry is down 42%, which means that they're about 22% ahead of everybody else. Mm-hmm. So the whole thing went south, but the competition didn't. Or the competition did, but they didn't.
So we're actually been doing both of these at the same time. Look for year-over-year improvement, but monitoring the marketplace trends at the same time.
Yeah, because what happens is
that's the only way you can do it.
That's the only way you can do it, because
right.
Otherwise you're doing it in a way that's inconsistent.
And finally, develop statistics relative to prospects, contacts, appointments, and closing ratios, dollars, and margins. Let me say it again. Develop statistics relative to prospects, contacts, appointments, and closing ratios and dollars and margins.
What happens is this. Are you getting larger margins? Are you getting higher conversion ratios? Are you getting more prospects? Are you getting more referrals? In other words, you want these things to be trending up. You don't want them to be flat. You want them to be trending up. Now, if you take a look and you do these things, you're not going to fall prey to the illusions that we talked about at first. Mm-hmm. And now what you do is you have an objective, honest evaluation of your sales force. How good are they really versus how good they could be? Mm-hmm. And your job is to remove excuses and to get these folks performing. Nobody makes a conscious effort to go in and say, let me show you how little I can do today. Well, maybe they do. But I'll tell you, you shouldn't have it in your organization, particularly with salespeople, because they're paid for performance.
Bill, it's been great doing these webinars with you. I look forward to the next one.
Oh, look forward to the next group we do.
Thanks. Thanks for joining the Sales Buzz. This has been a Brooks Group production.